Hello and welcome to the second episode of the podcast Echo. This is the show where it's not about what was said, it's about what you heard. So essentially we take our favourite podcast and maybe your favourite podcast and literally walk through what it is that we heard. I might hear something different to you. That's exactly the point of the show, and this is what my partner here, Ange, is going to look to do with me. And on today's show, we're going to go through an episode from the series by, well, for those of you in the UK, you'll be familiar with Dragon's Den. It's the dragon that's called Stephen Bartlett. He has a series called Diary of a CEO, on which he goes through celebrities, sports people, personalities, etc. And it's a very wide-ranging series. Like, I don't think there's a predefined agenda. It's, I guess, what the conversation leads to. Obviously, focusing on that experts or guests' expertise. And the episode we're going to look at is the episode he did with Dr. Steve Peters, who is a psychologist by profession, but is more known in the sporting world of helping out major sports personalities like the British Olympic cycling team, so like Chris Hoy, snooker star Ronnie O'Sullivan, Liverpool Football Club. So he's worked with a lot of those people to essentially help them achieve peak performances. Of those of you that are sporting fans or casual watchers as well, you may have known about the achievements of these sporting stars. So I thought it is a long podcast, I'll tell you that. It is a 2-hour one.
It's probably I think it's the longest one I've listened to ever. Not gonna lie.
And to be fair, before the show, when I shared this with Ange, I'm like, oh shit, I forgot it was 2 hours.
And I've listened to it 5 times.
Oh, there we go. I mean, look, I'll be very interested to hear what you think. So
Yeah.
I'd like to start by saying that it was one of the most wide-ranging interviews there was, and so many insights that he offered that you could apply to your own life. So I'd like to start with, essentially where the episode started, talking about the practical application of his work to the two personalities of Chris Hoy and Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
So he begins with Chris Hoy, saying that working with Chris around the time of the, I believe the London Olympics, I think it was. Yeah, where he mentioned that Chris Hoy came to him with this belief about his performance, saying that his focus can get distracted from what his rivals are doing.
Yeah.
So he was always worried about, what are their times like and how are they performing and their record, recently, etc. And Dr. Steve Peters helped him with the idea that, to be honest, you're in an environment where it's very fast-paced.
Yeah.
There's not the time to stop and think, which you might get in other sports.
Yeah.
And that led on to him saying that you should instead look to reprogram your mind with kind of fixed markers. So a fixed speed marker, I think what he calls like a leg speed as well, and basically limiting the amount of analysis that you do. And essentially that was the objective they set for the Olympics, to essentially switch off that thinking and analysis so that you can just focus on what you're actually doing in the here and now.
I think yeah and no. I think what he was saying is that you've almost got to go into like a like when you do something naturally, you don't even think about it. It just becomes
flow state.
Yeah, that's it. So I think what he was, that was the point. He was actually saying is don't think about what you're doing, just go on and do it. Like muscle memory. Like when, I don't know, the thing that I could liken it to is when you type your password into your keyboard, you get so used to typing it that you don't actually know where the letters are. It's just muscle memory because you know where your fingers have got to go. And I think, I think the reason that I listen to it so many times, for starters, right, is because it is quite long.
Yeah, I was going to say there's loads in there.
Yes, I mean Stephen Bartlett and Steve Peters. Is it Professor? Well, it is Professor Steve Peters, isn't it? So they both, not monotone voices. I'm not saying that, but they've both got quite is it dulcet tones? Quite low voices.
I said they're very neutral. It's not. Yeah.
So
yeah.
There was it wasn't difficult to follow at all. But I listened to it because it took me that many times to take it in, and I think it deserved it. like there are some podcasts that I've listened to where I can listen to them one time and I'm quite satisfied with listening to them one time and almost come
Yeah.
off it feeling like a little bit exhausted because it's been quite hectic. Whereas this wasn't the case with that one. Yeah, I think it was interesting because I think we do a lot of that naturally, what he was trying to say to Chris Hoy. You don't have time in that fast-paced environment to think about what you're doing, what your competitors are doing, because you're gonna lose something while you're doing that, and then you're not going to get that back. You're not going to be able to regain that pace. You need to start and stay at that level and just do it. Like it's like that even keel thing, isn't it? It's saying don't overperform. If you think too much, you're going to overperform, and if you think about what everybody else is doing, you're going to underperform, and you need to blinker yourself, like putting blinkers on a horse. Don't worry about anything else, just what you are doing, and don't worry about what speed you're doing. Don't worry about at any point whether you're going quick enough. Just concentrate on doing exactly the same thing again and again and again with consistency, but without thinking about anything else. I think you really got to listen to it, but it really resonated with me, to be honest, massively, because there are situations, I think, in everyday life where that would be incredibly useful.
Yeah, and as you said as well, it's something that we consciously do without consciously thinking about it. So as you said, with things like muscle memory, and you said the ability to do things without giving it second thoughts, like you said, typing without looking at the keys you're looking at.
Yeah.
As you said, with learning anything new, you know, it's an instrument or learning to drive or a new skill or whatever. You know, you consciously do things initially to get that understanding, the link between your actions and your thoughts and all this kind of thing to embed the behavior. And it's interesting that in the episode, Chris said that by working through this method of switching off and just being in that sort of flow state, as you mentioned, that in the Olympics itself, once he'd crossed that finishing line, he even forgot where he was.
Well, yeah, and I thought that's
remarkable, isn't it? You're in an Olympic race and you're like, oh shit, I've just crossed the finish line here.
But it's not. I know this is probably going to, I don't know how to say this without it possibly sounding really insulting, but it's a situation where you haven't got to think about tactics or...
No, it's true. You
know what I mean? It's just, I'm not saying it's easy. It's just easy. Just get on and you just do it. But it's almost like probably 75 to 80% of the stress and drama that we create in our own head about situations is actually, if we just cut it back to the bare bones, it's never as complicated as we think it is. All we've got to do is just do it, rather than think. Like, just fuck thinking. Just do it. Take out all of the emotion and everything else outside. Just do it, and you'll probably do it better than you've ever done it.
But this is why I think the next example he went into to build on that point about emotions was exactly the points that came up when he spoke to Ronnie O'Sullivan.
Yeah.
Now I'm a big O'Sullivan fan. I like snooker in general, but the fact that he's an amazing player is besides that. Yeah. But you read a lot about his battles with anxiety and depression and kind of thing, and especially honed in on the a match once where he played Stephen Hendry in a UK Championship match. And literally midway through the match, he just walked off.
Yeah.
He shook Stephen Hendry's hand and said, I'm off. And even Stephen's like, where's he going? And then even the referee's like, is he gone for a break or what's going on? He's like, no, he's just conceded.
And
everybody...
First, didn't
he literally, he took a shot, missed the ball, and Stephen came to table, and he just shook his hand and didn't explain to the ref, he just walked out. And, you know, Steve Peters and O'Sullivan sort of went into it, well, why did that happen? And Ronnie talked about saying there was his voice in his head saying, you know, if you're not asked, you don't have to be here. You can't just leave. And, you know, but there was another voice in his head saying, I just want to play snooker. I like the game. I just want to play it and enjoy it. And I'm playing someone that I respect and know in Stephen Hendry. But the first voice was the stronger of the two. And it said, you know, just play this shot and just walk out.
Yeah.
And, you know, that you know, in the prelude to this, you know, Steve Peters goes through his... three-tiered model of the human, chimp, and computer systems, which I find really cool. I mean this I know is a background to his book, The Chimp Paradox, which a lot of people might have heard of, but If you
I
haven't,
have heard
honestly,
it,
check it out.
I've not read it.
Really good. I mean, just to touch on it very briefly, the three components, right? It's essentially saying like your whole system neuroscientifically is based upon three facets of the human system, which thinks logically but is slow. So these are the things that like want you to slow down, and the overthinker, the tendency to overthink. Then you've got the chimp, who thinks and moves at speed but is driven by emotion. And consequently, he's the one, or it's the one that is the critical part of it. Like if you're running or cycling, in Chris Hoy's case, should I be going faster? I'm not going fast enough. What's going on here? And then the computer moves faster, and in Steve Peters' terms, 20 times faster than the human system and 4 times quicker than the chimp system. It just needs programming, and that's the automatic thinking that we were talking about, the autopilot. So it's in conjunction that these three work together. And in Ronnie O'Sullivan's case, it was the idea that the chimp, which was the first voice, impulsively takes over. So what they were looking to try and do there is essentially manage the chimp, not control it, because by definition it's impulsive. It's impulsive.
That's what he says. He says there's no point trying to control it or change it. What you have to do is learn how to manage it. And I found that really interesting because, I mean, obviously I'm quite open about my mental health, and I am bipolar and I struggle with a lot of things. And I think I'm gonna openly talk about this. We were supposed to do this last week, but I was really poorly. You were running a bit late, and I think my chimp jumped in then and went, well, no. And I was honest about it. I said to you, I know that I'm being snappy, but if we can't do it at the time, I'm not going to do it. I think that was my chimp taking over and going, no, hold on a minute. And I think I'd already listened to the podcast before that 3 times, and I've since listened to it another 2 times. And every time I listen to it, I hear that slightly different. And every time I hear it slightly different, I take something new from it. And I think, okay, so I know now what that is and why it's happening. And in fact, now I can preempt it a little bit and almost just like tame it. And just say, okay, I know that's how you feel, but we're not going to deal with that right now because it's not appropriate. And I really loved that analogy, and I think that's really going to work quite well for me. I think that really resonated with me because I talk to myself a lot anyway. Like I genuinely run through a lot of conversations in my own head, and he talks quite a lot about when you're talking to yourself, you're talking to your chimp. And I've kind of got this little vision of this little, like the see no evil, hear no evil monkeys somewhere.
Yeah.
Like in there. Just sat there, I don't know, like twiddling her hair or, just sat there waiting, just patiently like tapping the fingers, waiting to jump up and go, wow, I'm here. And I really felt that, and I really got it, and it really resonated with me. Just loads of it did, to be honest. But I think that was quite a big thing for me.
I love it when you look at the books as well. Actually, you'll see all across the pages around here, there is literally just a little doodle of a chimp. Right. No content, literally just here and there. Like a divider or something, just a little doodle. Because you're right that like a lot of what we appeal to is our emotional side. Like actually, it takes back to the work I did with my coach about many of us have lived in that logical space.
Yeah.
The human, is in like the wants to work things out, overthinks, especially if you're in the typically secure industries of profession, so finance, law, medicine, engineering, etc., etc., etc. So to then stem into or tap into the emotional side is difficult because we're not used to being in that world, and when we feel ourselves drifting there, we catch ourselves going, "Oh wait, I shouldn't." Display this behavior or this emotion. Quick, put that away. And indeed, I've seen posts on social media talking about the same thing, and actually might lead on to the next point that they discussed about where do beliefs come from.
Yeah.
So in that segment, the host Stephen Bartlett mentioned in his space that his folks had a very loud, shouty relationship.
Yeah.
And consequently, from learning from that, I guess all the effects that he saw and how he felt, saying he's never been one to be shouty. Yeah. And, I believe that came from an underlying belief that shouting basically achieved nothing.
Yeah.
That's the message that he took from it. So it achieves nothing. It's harmful to both parties. There's no winner, contrary to popular belief.
Yeah.
And it's digging at the need for human connection because you're trying to be heard.
Yeah.
But counterintuitively, you're not heard because people tend to either switch off or disengage.
It's funny because I at some points during my childhood, and I mean not when my mum met my dad, who she's with now, who I consider my dad, but prior to that, there had been some quite shouty relationships, and weirdly, when I was probably an early teenager, I spent a lot of time shouting, trying to shout my point across. But as I got a bit older and actually went off traveling and spent more time by myself, and I turned into this quite quiet person. That doesn't mean that I'm a walkover, and it doesn't mean that, but I don't like shouting. But I've learned through shouting that shouting doesn't achieve anything. But one of the things he talks about though is, although that is a value and something that you believe, if you do it, it isn't a bad thing. You don't have to chastise yourself for it. You have to kind of go, well, okay, my chimp escaped a little bit there, and that's fine, but what have we learned from it? And I really liked that, because it's very, very rare that I do shout now. And I think probably until I listened to this, I probably would have walked away from any situation where I'd done that, feeling like, shit, I've really let myself down. I wish I hadn't have done that. Whereas now I don't think I will. Now I think I'll be like, right, okay, so that happened. What have I learned from it? And I'll look at it very, very differently now. And I think that's a really important lesson. I just think that's a really important lesson to learn, that we can all sometimes do things that we're not particularly proud of because one of our other systems has jumped in, but it's all right. It doesn't have to, be a massive big deal.
I mean, to be honest, there speaks someone I think that's really listened to this podcast a lot of times, because that's really well put. Because literally, I'm just going through my notes here when I heard it too, that the chimp is impulsive, and it's interesting, they re-examined that belief a couple of times where Stephen's gone, yeah, but no matter who, because Stephen kept reiterating, Steve Bartlett that is, that no matter whoever it is, you don't shout. And then Steve Peters interjects going, okay, so if you did shout, is it a failure?
Yeah. And
Stephen goes, yeah, it is, because that's what my belief is. But then Steve Peters introduced the idea that when perhaps a better belief, and this is if he resonates, is that if you do shout, you can be kind to yourself.
Yeah. Because
that's your impulsive chimp system acting impulsively, and it's an opportunity to instead update our computer system that the chimp refers to.
Yeah.
So the way you interwove the idea that that we all make mistakes all the time when it comes to exhibiting a behavior that we thought had gone, or we wanted to improve on, or rears its head again. And that's I think the point that I often heard in my journey of I introduces the idea of you're always a student. You're never gonna finish learning or achieve it or have cracked it, or as in cracked it forever. I mean, when I see phrases like cracked it or breakthrough route, it's more like you now introduced yourself to the possibility.
Yeah.
So it's not to say that you'll always go down this new behavior. You can take practice and steps to make it the new learning behavior, so i.e. updating your computer system.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be right, I'm forever going to be this Zen person that never reacts.
No.
Unless you're like the Dalai Lama, but I bet even he has his moments.
I bet he walks away sometimes and goes, fucking hell.
Yeah, literally, yeah, honestly, yeah, exactly. It's true. But I think it brings us back to the interesting part about the question about the belief. It is, as you said, when you deconstruct things, like we talked about before, about you deconstruct a seemingly complex process, action, especially when it's new, you're like, shit, I'll never be able to do that. But when you break it down into its bits, you're like, oh, okay,
yeah,
I can do things step by step. And similarly with the belief is, like, sometimes we think the only action we have when it comes to our beliefs is like, well, that's just who I am, that's all I can do.
Yeah.
But it's then I think it's a question of, okay, do you want to change that? And if you don't, that's okay.
Yeah.
I think sometimes we're trapped in this place that I have to change everything, I have to change this, I have to change. But if you don't want to, that's okay. In fact, that not wanting to is a further possibility for you to ask yourself, well, do you want to ask yourself why you're not doing, not like accusing, like, why don't you want to change? You should change. It's more like, okay, it's interesting that you don't want to change it. Is there any reason? If you don't want to explore that, that's okay.
Yeah.
Even that very act of going, I have this behavior, I don't necessarily want to change it, that's okay. But just know that there are possibilities beyond that.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I don't by any stretch of the imagination have myself sussed out. I've realised that. I thought I was a lot closer than what I actually am. And actually, us doing this has made me realise that, because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and I never thought I would come away from so many podcasts with aha moments, but I am. And actually, I thought maybe I was about 75% together, but I'm beginning to think it's probably a little bit less than that now. But I think, yeah, he talks about gremlins, right? Gremlins, and what's the other one?
Viruses.
No, it's not. It's not. It's gremlins and...
Well, you mean things that get in your system?
Yeah. It's not viruses. He uses another word. It begins with G. Gremlins. So it talks about your chimp system, your computer system, and then gremlins are... So one of them can be changed, and the other one you just have to accept is there. Oh my God, how annoying.
I'll find it somewhere.
I'm going to Google. I'm going to Google. I'm going
to see if my notes pick up anything.
Right, no, hold on. What is it? Professor...
Goblins,
that's it.
There we go. Got there in the end.
Yeah, so gremlins are something you can change. Goblins are something that you can't change. And he talked about... Yeah. How a lot of therapists will try and get you to change something that actually can't be changed. And I really liked that, because I know there's a lot of stuff in me that is never going to be changed. And I have seen psychiatrists because of my mental health and stuff. And they've always made me go back over the things that have brought me to this situation. And I've always said that I don't think that's necessary. I don't think I need to go over the stuff that is back there, because it has changed me, irreversibly it has changed me. I don't need to understand that, because I already know that. What I need to understand and learn is how to accept that, put it away, and not let it continue to impact my life. And I think he talks about that incredibly well, and not very many psychiatrists, psychologists, and all of that do, because I think there is a belief that if you can look at something and you can talk about it and you can deal with it, but I don't think that's right for every situation. And I've always said that. And I think there are probably hundreds of podcasts out there that say exactly the same, but I haven't listened to hundreds of podcasts, and I have listened to his. And it was a massive moment for me, because I've spent a lot of time with people telling me that I need to deal with it and I need to move on from it. And actually, I don't need to deal with it, and I don't need to move on from it. But it doesn't have to shape me. It doesn't have to hold me prisoner. It can stay quite firmly where it belongs in the past, but it's always going to be there. And I'm all right with that. And I think that was the first time I've heard anybody actually say it in that way, and I really liked it a lot. I think that's why I listened to it again and again and again.
I really like the way you put that again, because even though you said that, okay, there may be hundreds of podcasts saying it, I still think that's a novel point, because in the face of the overwhelming maybe majority, and again, I'm not saying one's right and one's wrong, by the way, this is just about the perspective offered. A lot of it, as you say, move on, flip your emotion around, I even again saw the topic of toxic positivity on a couple of social media posts that I've been seeing recently and interacted with. But you said the point of having those parts of your experiences that are a part of you, knowing why they are there, accepting why they're there, and not needing to dwell on it. And correct me if I'm wrong, it's like, as you said, when you may have seen these people in the past, it's like, as you said, yeah, you wanted to go down the, okay, I get that they're there, I don't need to spend time there, I want to go, okay, what's the best management for it? How do I guess, learned from it, if you will.
Yeah.
But it's like there seems to be a fixation for I don't know what motive to go there. And it's like, well, do you want to go there and stay there? Or is it about, okay, we can utilize it as, okay, that's where it may have started from. Now we go to, right, how do we manage it? How do we unfold it? Because that takes back to the work I've done is like, when you work on yourself, you're not looking to actually counterintuitively not get rid of anything. So I talk about my process as a character-based approach. Your life is comprised of characters that you've made from your own subconscious to deal with life.
Yeah.
Now, whether you like them or not, there are parts of you that you hate and you don't get them, but they are doing something for you in terms of meeting your needs. Now, the challenge of the work is not to go, oh, I love everybody, I love every character. It's more about, okay, you understand why the character is there, you can see what they're doing, thank them, and go, right, do you know what? You can retire now. I've got other ways to meet my needs more healthily. And every now and again, they might pop up. So the analogy my coach used, and I really liked, was a backseat driver.
Yeah.
You know, for years, they might have just been in the side seat, sort of pointing out, do this, do that, and maybe even take the wheel occasionally. But now they can sit in the back. Now, occasionally, they might pop up going, you know, you might want to do this and that. And you go, all right, thanks, you know, but I'm driving now.
Yeah.
You know, so it's really nice that you were able to say that, you know, you were able to hear this voice say that there are parts of you that are okay. Yeah. And indeed, he said that, you know, there are times you won't be able to control the chimp system.
Yeah.
It's that impulsive.
And almost, it makes me almost want to embrace it a little bit more. I'm not going to lie. It's kind of made me go, all right, you little chimp. I'm quite excited now because I think now we're going to work together instead of you rearing up and absolutely blowing chaos on everything and making everything just go a little bit bonkers for a while, and then me sitting back going, shit, why did I let that happen? So it has really truly like got my brain ticking, and my little chimp's back there now, like swinging on the monkey bars, really excited for how this experience. I can't explain it. It's massively like, it's made me think that it's all right. You know, actually, it's okay to have those little outbursts. Just don't stay there. Understand them. And then as time, I mean, I've managed to get a handle on quite a lot in my mental health and in my life. And I think that there was some like little key things that have been missing for me. And I definitely think this was one of them, because I think what this is going to teach me is to understand the signs of when the chimp is starting to, like, I can almost see this little chimp start shaking and then do you remember Mighty Mouse?
Yeah.
When he used to get ready to jump off, he used to like do this thing, and then he used to go woof. And then,
yeah.
That's almost like how I can see my little chimp getting ready to go, like just like all of a sudden, then boom, out. And I think now I might better understand the signs of when that's going to happen and take a look at it and understand it a little bit better and actually embrace it rather than be frustrated with it or scared of it or annoyed about it. And I think excuse me. Oh my God, I need to get rid of this cough. And it's just, it must just resonated hugely. I was just like, right, okay. And I think I listened to the whole podcast again this morning. It's actually 2 hours and 4 minutes, by the way. And I listened to it this morning again, and I actually went back to that bit and listened to it a couple of times because it really, I think it's important. I think there needs to be a massive fucking change on how people are pushed to deal with these things, and I think that's a really good way specifically for people that struggle with this side of them that comes out every now and again that they have no control over, that they then go and beat themselves up about. And like, I've spent a lot of time hiding away as an adult for weeks and weeks on end because something will have happened that will have made me spiral, and it will make me not want to leave the house, and I won't want to see anyone, I won't want to speak to anybody, because although I didn't realise it, I'm utterly ashamed of a situation that's occurred that I've had no control over. And there's a lot of people out there that struggle with that. And I think listening to this would not instantly give a change of perspective, but, you know, a definite gradual, listen to it a couple of times and, you know, really, really listen to it. I think it will help.
Well, I think that's the power of any good podcast, to be fair, but whatever the subject matter might be, because if it can help illuminate things for you, like you mentioned the Mighty Mouse build-up.
Yeah.
There's, so many instances where, you look at, funny enough, things like TV and film. It's like those origin stories or the beginnings. When say Bruce Wayne first builds the Batcave, or Superman first takes off the glasses, or whatever it might be. It's like, oh, they're building up to something here. They found, maybe a previously untapped thing, and now they're on the cusp of like something quite incredible, right? And I like the way that this episode is dealt with, major personalities that people look up to, sporting greats. And funny enough, that story, when you think about it, is actually quite common in all of the big sports stars. No, I know it's a bit sports centric this episode, but you could even akin it to other populist areas, music.
Yeah.
How many artists are so rife for like, am I coming across okay? Am I singing about the right thing? Are people resonate? There's real angst in their personality to be accepted, to be heard. No matter how controversial or quality their music is like. Come back to sport, just literally as I'm talking made me think of two examples that you hear recently. Like there's a Michael Jordan documentary that came out where he talks about, I would have probably missed the most baskets ever. But it's the idea that at the same time I also scored loads and won a load of games and championships, etc. And, people say Lionel Messi as one of the best footballers ever, or indeed the best player ever. But only his shot success rate, if you look at the statistics, I think 1 in every 7 shots or something like that.
Yeah.
But he doesn't necessarily get bogged down on the numbers or the fact that he keeps missing. It's like, well, he still is able to produce this kind of output despite all this. So I think the message from there is, you can have the things like anxiety, the beliefs where your chimp system has gone haywire and your human system is not necessarily caught up with it, and your computer needs updating. Whether you're like the most successful person in their profession ever or not really well known at all, it's a common trait between the two of us.
Yeah.
We're more similar than you think in that regard. So I think the illumination here is that it's always possible to work on it. And I think that's what Steve Peters has mentioned, that yes, he may work with high profile names, but his output, especially his books and talks and that, is aimed at helping people, the reader, find their own.
It's funny that you
abilities.
said about this being like really sports based. I actually, although I know that he was talking about sporting personalities in it, I didn't really see it as a sport based.
And that's, I think, his craft of actually going, I don't have to just talk about from a sports place. It's like, that's just the applied example.
I think he says at the beginning, doesn't he, that he isn't a sports therapist,
psychologist. Exactly. Yeah.
He's a brain person.
Yeah.
So actually, what he does, and I think when he was talking about 2 of the sports people that he's worked with, they actually said he didn't come at us about sport. He talked to us about us. So although it is based around sports personalities, initially when I first listened to it the very first time, I did hear that. But I think the more I listened to it, the less I really noticed that he was talking about sports people. And the more I listened to what he was actually saying about your brain and how your brain works. And I think I almost switched off to the fact that he was talking about sports people, because it almost becomes irrelevant when you've like really heard what he's saying. And I think the first time I listened to it, definitely I got the whole sports thing. But I think after that, as you just said it now, I was just thinking, when I listened to it this morning, I didn't really hear anything about the sports side of things. What I heard was him using that as a practical way to explain to people, because everybody kind of understands sports one way or another. But yeah, it's actually I've actually got the episode open, because I don't watch them generally. I listen to them when I'm out and about in the mornings. I have a couple of hours in the mornings where that's my little bit of time, and I usually listen to podcasts. But it's actually had 807,190 views.
There you go.
I think it needs more. I wonder if a few of those people have kind of heard what we've heard, or whether they've heard something completely different.
Or it could be simple things where, like, you know, a 2-hour episode. There's a lot of value in here.
Yeah.
And it's one that you will pause, rewind, listen to the whole thing again, listen to the whole chapters again, because they go into topics, and it wasn't an episode filled with, like, you know, loads of questions, but they'd stay on a topic for a little while. And indeed, one of the topics that, you know, they dug into a lot was dealing with low self-esteem.
Yeah.
So the opening question put to Steve Peters was, how do you work with someone with low self-esteem? Very big, you know, impact, very broad question. And Steve Peters talks about, you know, neuroscientifically, when we talk about low self-esteem, it's the chimp again. It's the fear that we're not good enough, and that's then inbuilt into cognitive bias. We look for proof that we're not good enough. So basically saying, see, I told you so.
Yeah.
So this is where, you know, categories of anxiety come up, like maths anxiety or financial anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And he builds upon that, saying, look, when you compare yourself, for example, to other people, you know, literally, you know, how are they doing it, that kind of thing. Our chimp system is going off. It's basically saying, don't put yourself in a position where you boast and, you know, go, oh, I'm the man, or I'm the woman, because you could run the risk of getting shot down.
Yeah.
So
I've been very aware of this for a while, and it really summed it up quite well, because he was talking about, he was saying that you're actually your emotional stuff actually starts happening before you're even born.
Yeah.
Like, you know, the environment that you are in or around before you are born is already impacting your emotional state. And I found that incredibly interesting. But what he said is that if when you're young and your brain is still forming and something happens at school, like you get 1 on a test, and then
Yes.
you go home and your dad tells you off for something else, those two things together could ultimately be really harmful to how your brain develops and how your brain reacts to things. And this is something I know I genuinely did realize this quite a long time ago, and I've talked about it, not extensively. I've talked about it with my mum and my dad. Now, my real dad and my mum, when they separated, lived quite far apart, so I spent quite a lot of time traveling in between them both, mainly every other weekend, or my biological father just wouldn't turn up. And if he did turn up, sometimes he'd turn up and he wouldn't take me. And as a child, it was incredibly emotional, because he was my dad and I just wanted to be with him. And then he got a new family. And then what started happening is that my mum moved to Leicester and my dad stayed in London. And my mum used to put me, or my dad used to put me on a National Express coach. And I would get put on at one end and collected at the other end by the other parent. Now, ever so occasionally, my dad would be late, or, you know, whatever, and I'd be like 9, 10, 11 in Victoria train station by myself, waiting for him to turn up. Now, fast forward, travel, any kind of travel, instills an absolute sickness in my stomach. Now, it was only about 3 years ago when I actually really started to look internally that I actually began to understand where that had come from. So, like, if I go anywhere on the train, now recently when I went to London, and but there are also some good memories attached, because me and my mum used to get on the National Express coach at Victoria to go and see my nan in Leicester, because my nan's lived in Leicester for a really long time. So there are also some really good memories attached to that. But I think the core memory is between my mum and my dad from such an early age, even though it wasn't Express related. So when I was coming back from London, and I actually got really emotional at the London Victoria Station, because when I got there, it's still the same 440 to Leicester, and it still goes from the same place as what it did when I was a kid. And I took a picture and I sent it to Mum, and I said to my mum, this feels really weird. And all of a sudden I got this sick feeling in my stomach again, like I used to. And the bus driver came and asked me if I was all right. And I said to him, I've got to say, I feel really emotional. And that whole journey back, I had that same feeling. I did realize it a few years ago that was my issue with travel, and it was, you know, it was something that was very, very, very deep rooted from stuff that happened as a child. And even though there were good memories attached to it as well, because it was, you know, getting on the coach, wondering if my dad was even going to remember to get me, and being very aware that I was leaving him and I wasn't going to see him for another 2 weeks, and he was going to go back to his, all of that together has damaged my brain. It's damaged how my brain deals with travel, the most basic thing. And I've wound up living somewhere where I don't have to get buses and coach, and I ride a motorbike. I don't have a car, and that isn't always, possible. But I ended up living in a place where I don't need to get on public transport to get anywhere, and everything's, within walking distance. And I work from home, and everything I do now is based around avoiding that travel. So for me, I'm definitely going to read his book, because I think that there's going to be more insight in there for me on how best for me to deal with this thing that has absolutely crippled me my entire adult life. And he made some points in there that really got me more thinking about it, more than I have already thought about it, if that makes sense.
I think you've done incredibly well so far with it. The fact that you've recognized a adult behavior that you exhibit today, or have had for a little while, to track it back to, okay, this is where it started. Now, some might go, yeah, but that's easy to work out, isn't it? That's not the point. The fact that you've made that link in the first place, rather than just go, oh, I don't do travel, it does this and that and the other. And that's, again, we're not to say, right, we're going to change this wholesale scene now like a massive globetrotter. That's not the point either. But it's you going, okay, this is where it started. I can also go, it wasn't always bad. So not every coach trip is a looming disaster or whatever. I did have good moments, etc., attached to it, but there's a way that I can manage this now, and it might involve a little bit of emotional overwhelm at times.
Yeah.
But as he mentioned in the episode, right, that you're right, that's the creation of a goblin, which, as he said, comes from a experience of trauma.
Yeah.
Again, people might go, what trauma? What are you talking about? Like, there's capital T trauma and small t trauma. That's probably a discussion for another time.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that the aim here is to accept that the goblin is there, and then what is the plan of action when they do appear. So these are the things where you mentioned before, it's not about a therapist or whomever changing everything and forgetting it ever happened and this kind of thing, but it's like, right, what can I do with that? And in your case, you're able to go, okay, I can still take coach journeys.
Yeah.
I can, utilize a motorbike. I don't have to take, a car or public transport or wherever it might be. And yes, at times, if I do have to make a journey, like say you did to London, and that involves revisiting, that's still my own choice. That's, you can take that responsibility. And as you said, he finishes that part off by going, you can still work with the person to overcome it. But if it keeps recurring, you can look to accept it and not keep the pressure up on the person to get rid of it.
To get rid of it. Well, do you know, weirdly, this was, you'd sent me this podcast after that morning when I was leaving London.
Yes.
Weirdly, this is what I was listening to when I was on that National Express coach heading out of London.
Well, there we go.
And it should have only taken like an hour and 50 minutes, but it took us nearly an hour and 10 minutes just to get out of central London. It was absolutely bonkers. So I listened to the whole episode on the journey to Leicester, and it was it couldn't have played out better, to be honest. Yeah. You said to me after you'd sent it, I've realised it's a really long podcast episode, and I was like, well, it's fine because I've got all this time on the coach. And then I got to Victoria, and I just went, like it was that, like that weird sicky feeling, like something bad's going to happen, but you don't, like this looming impending doom that you.
I was going to say that's the exact phrase that came up, impending shit. Yeah.
And I listened. I listened to this on that journey, and just sort of like sat there, almost like that 11-year-old child that I was. That's what it felt like. It was really weird. It was almost like if it was a movie, you'd have seen me shrink back into me as a little girl, sat there listening to this episode that's talking about exactly what I'm going through right at that moment. And it just, you couldn't have picked a better podcast to give me to listen to that very morning on the way back, doing something that is exactly what he was talking about.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because I too have experienced something along the same lines of, you don't consciously ask for direction sometimes, but you just feel there's a sense of like, in your case, it was maybe a bit of impending doom or emotional overwhelm, or call it what you will. And for me, it was a sense of like, am I feeling a bit lost? You can't quite put your finger on it, but it's like you're looking for some direction, guidance, this kind of thing. And you mentioned the podcast helped on this journey that was delayed for whatever reason, the traffic, as you said, that enabled you to listen to the whole thing and give you some insight, some illumination into that. Maybe this might be for another episode. I ended up watching a Bollywood film yesterday,
Right.
and I've been meaning to watch it for a while, because it's basically a film about a father whose son is dismissed from school because he was the subject of a dodgy video that went viral, that was made in school. He got thrown out, and he's trying to get his son put back into school, because he said it's the school's fault for not educating him about the subject matter.
Right.
And the film is centered around him getting guidance from a reincarnation of a Hindu god.
Right.
He sees the guy as like an ordinary man, so he's been sent to Earth, that we know as the viewer.
Yeah.
But, he gets this sort of pearls of wisdom kind of thing. And there are moments in the film that, like, shit, this is what the kind of direction you feel I'm looking for.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, it's not that if I could relate to the plot of the film, or whatever, but it was just, it was just even small little phrases, things like, keep faith. If everyone else doesn't seem to get it, start with your own change.
Yeah.
Never mind what everybody else is doing. What are you doing first? And just little snippets here and there going, okay, it's weird. I picked this time on a Monday afternoon
To watch
at this day to watch this. And I'm like, okay, has it given me the new impetus and stuff to go, right, I'm going to re-engineer everything? No, but at the same time, it's given me that little bit of direction as to where I might want to go. But as I said, maybe that's for another time. We should carry on with this podcast, right? There's a question that he asked in the middle. I want to see what you think, right? Do we choose what we believe? That was a big one.
Oh, so I thought about this as well. So I'm not prepared, but I did think about it. I did give it some thought. I think when we're younger, a lot of what we believe is imposed on us.
Yeah.
Some of what we believe when we're younger is just pure innocence, because we see the world through very innocent eyes. And I think that as we get older, if we are strong enough and we are confident enough to stop giving a crap about what other people think, then I think yes, we can create our own beliefs. But I do think that's what you asked me, wasn't it?
Yeah, the question was, do we choose what we believe?
Yeah, I think we can. I think we can create our own beliefs. But I think if they've drastically changed, or we feel that they have, somewhere inside they were already like a seed that was planted. I think it might be really difficult to completely stray from something. I think all of our beliefs are probably already in there, that just needed nurturing. And I think that because we all go to school, we go to primary school, we go to high school, some people go to college, some people go to university, some people just go out there and travel, there are always going to be little things that are implanted in us that potentially could turn into beliefs.
Right, okay.
Do I think we can adopt a brand new belief and completely change our thought processes? I'm not sure that I think that's possible. I think if it's already in there and it's something that we've already thought about in passing and thought, yeah, I can actually get behind that, and it's left in there long enough that it can grow, and it was put in there at a point where we were still developing and learning, and we were creating ourselves. We were in creation of who we were going to become, and we were learning and we were molding and we were shaping.
Okay, let me ask this then as well as an extension. Do you think there's a link between your beliefs, however they're formed or chosen, to your values, and where are they formed or created or picked up?
I think you've frozen. Are you still there?
Oh, I'm still here.
Or I've stuck. Maybe I've stuck.
You're coming back
What's
into
happening?
you now, but I can still hear you.
Hello?
Hang on. I can still hear you. Okay, seriously? Alright, for those watching the video, apologies. The connection has gone weird.
Hello?
I can still hear you. Alright, this is going to be a pausing moment, isn't it? Hold on. You fucking... Virgin bench of meat, I'm gonna fucking kill you, you stupid cunt! Bloody hell.
What happened?
The internet just decided to go.
That's all right.
Just,
I made myself a fresh cup of tea and went to the loo and stirred my dinner.
That's going to make an interesting one to edit.
Good luck with that.
Shall we? No. Shall we just recap that last question quickly? Because we had about 10 minutes left on the time.
Yeah.
So we'll just makes it easy for the edit if I just start the question from afresh. We don't have to go into the same length. But
well, we can just be honest and just say, look, we've had a technical issue, so we've edited, but we're picking back up. Just be honest about it, because otherwise you're going to try and cut it. It's going to look like we edit it, and we don't. We go back through. This is just unfortunately a technical issue.
Yeah, I mean, the edit I think will be easy enough. It would just look like we're just naturally asking the next question. So I'm just saying, just so we can piece it. I think whatever we end up doing, whether I blur it in or put the disclaimer in, if we just say, if I just go into this question, as I said, we don't have to make it as lengthy an answer, because I know we've only got 10 minutes if we want to cover other bits. So let's just go back to where I was. He says, no. Right.
Because I already answered it, didn't I? And then you asked me another question.
Yeah, I added to the question, innit? And that was a pity, because it was a really good bit as well, actually. Do you know what I'll do instead? I think there'll be enough at the end in that question to lead into another one.
Okay.
Yeah, I think let's do that. Yeah, hang on.
Oh, microphone. I need the microphone. There we go. That's better. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I could hear you before anyway, but yeah, let's go. Yeah.
Okay.
Here we go. Yeah, so on the subject of what the podcast said about linking values and beliefs, there was a really good example I think he used of a young woman who he worked with, I think in a hospital, I think, saying she didn't like the way she looked, but she had a real love of animals. So Dr. Peters said, why don't you look after the animals on the ward? I don't know whether they were like local pets or something like that.
It wasn't. They just got a bird table. It was about the bird table and the cat.
That's it.
And he said, we've got a cat, and no one seems to really be bothered with the cat. And, nobody really seems to be looking after the bird table. Would you be interested in doing it? And it changed everything for her.
Yeah, because I think he's saying like that simple act of just giving her the responsibility.
Yeah.
Then appeal to her purpose and her value, and as a natural byproduct, raised her self-esteem, because now she's like, okay, I've got to care for these animals. I like that anyway, because I love animals. So to her, what she looked like didn't matter. It's now that she was going to look after the animals and fulfill the role as a carer.
Yeah.
So you're saying like psychodynamically, you look after yourself by looking after the animals.
Yeah.
Because
a slave to that.
Yeah. But that's actually a fine balance, actually, that we tune in.
I've thought about it a lot because, as you know, I really struggle with leaving the house, and I'm having to get better at it. So I've just taken a little cleaning job, and it's 5 minutes walk up the road. It's every morning, but it's every morning. It's 7 days a week, and this really resonated with me also. And I say this a lot, but so I know that I have to go because there's nobody else to do it. It's just me, 7 days a week, an hour and a half. And it's no different from going to the gym and doing an hour and a half of cardio or going swimming, which I love. But it resonated with me massively because in my mind, I need to go there every day. But actually, that's not a good balance. I am going to go there every day because that's what I feel that I need to do at the moment. But if I don't go, which I did, I had to ring in poorly Saturday and Sunday because I've been really, really poorly. If I hadn't have listened to this, I would have absolutely been beating myself up about not going in because I was poorly. But because I'd listened to this, I just thought, no, it's all right. I'm not going to get into conflict with myself over the fact that although I feel I need to do that every day because it makes me feel better, I don't have to do it every day because it makes me feel better. I don't have to be in conflict with myself over it. And I think
that's a really good applied example.
For this podcast couldn't have been better, I'm not going to lie.
Well, it's something I think we mentioned earlier of we're very quickly to default to beat ourselves up because of maybe a belief that we're not good enough. And anything that strikes at that, we either amplify or look for bias towards it, or go, okay, any first sign of that, and it's like, see, I told you. So as you said, you enjoying going to the job, you know, it gave you all that it does, it appeals to values, etc. When you are naturally ill, and the natural response was to go, no, do you know what, I need to take care of myself and this kind of thing. A default might have been, oh shit, I've let people down, I feel guilty about not going. And, but again, it's just with that practice of going, no, there's times when other needs are maybe more prominent, or it's looking after yourself in that wider sense. So even though that action that you do of going daily to your job, you know, brings you a lot of satisfaction and value, you know, you need to take care of your other needs as well.
Yeah, 100%. I would have really beat myself up about it, and I am really fortunate that the lady that I do the bit of cleaning for is very, very patient and understanding, and you know, I generally had been really poorly all week, and I'd still gone in anyway, but I really reached a point where I could, it's only a 5-minute walk, but it was really, really cold. I've got a bit of a chest infection, as you can hear from the cough. And I really felt that I needed to stay in and keep warm. And I literally just brought my duvet down on the sofa and snuggled up with my dogs and didn't move for 2 days solid. But that would have absolutely, because I made a commitment, and, you know, there would have been a part of me that would have been absolutely going at myself for being poorly, although I've got no control over that. I've got no control over being poorly. And probably what would have happened normally, and my mental health can strike me down, but general physical, like illness, I generally just soldier through, because I get stopped in my tracks so much by my mental health. I tend not to let my physical health stop me, because I can control it better. And I just thought, no, that's not healthy. My body needs a couple of days to recoup, and it's absolutely hammering me in the face with that and telling me that you need some time to recoup. And I need to listen and not beat myself up about it, and just have a chat with my chimp about giving me grief over something that actually is necessary in order for me to feel better.
But I also wonder then if by telling yourself that message you're giving yourself, saying no, I need that time, or like to recover and rest, raised your self-esteem and worth to the extent that actually helped your physical health too.
Yeah.
So it's funny, you know, it's often quoted that, you know, mental health is a driver or as important as physical, but we tend to pick up on the physical easier.
Yeah,
oh, I've got a cold, or I've got a cough. It's like, that's easier, but it's
I think that mental health has been massively stigmatized. Like,
yeah.
You can't. I don't think people talk enough about mental health, and I will shout from the rooftops, and I'm very open about mine. But I think that's because I hid it for so long. I mean, I didn't tell my mum and dad that I was bipolar until 5 years ago. And we had a really frank conversation with it after I came back from London, because I went to see my parents after London, because it was kind of on the way home. And I said to them, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't trust you enough with this, and I didn't tell you, because it would have made all of our lives a lot easier for a really, really long time if they'd have actually known what was going on. But I didn't think that they would get it, and I didn't think it would be that easy. But that's not their fault. That's the world in general that makes people with mental health feel like there's something terribly wrong with them, when actually I think it's 1 in 3 people. You know, there are a lot of people out there that have got issues that don't confront it because they're scared of what people are going to think, and we shouldn't live in a world like that anymore.
Well, it's these things are more common than we think. You know, the stats are plentiful out there. Even, you know, it doesn't even have to be like what people might call headline issues. It's more things like, you know, I forget the numbers themselves, but the stats around things like loneliness and not having anyone to reach out to, they're on the rise amongst all age groups at a very fast, uncomfortable rate.
I think there's a couple. I've lost 3 really close friends recently to suicide, and I would have there's 2 people in particular that I would have really liked to have given these, like, a couple of the podcasts that I've listened to recently, given it to them to listen to, because I don't know whether it would have changed anything, but it might have given them a newer perspective. You know, it might have just made them stop and think. I don't know. That's probably a conversation for another time, to be honest. But you know, it's yeah. A lot of this podcast really resonated with me, but it was really specific for things that were happening right at the time that I was listening to the podcast. That I don't think there's another podcast out there that would have come at the right time with that journey back from London to Leicester, and you know, this last week with this like little job that I've got, and it just I don't think if you'd have known everything that if I'd have preemptively known everything that was going to happen from leaving London on Saturday morning to the end of last week, you know, where I've like been really, really poorly, I don't think you could have actively picked a better podcast if you'd have known exactly how that week was going to play out. Does that make sense?
Very much so, and I'm glad that you took so much from it, from sharing it. And as I say, like the fact that you've listened to it multiple times and able to talk so well about it, you know, just shows that not only have you, you know, this obviously this session isn't about an exam, like, you know, how much do you remember from it and etc., but to show the application that you've taken to it is really quite cool. And it just goes to show for anybody that like obviously we've, you know, so far we've picked a couple of episodes that have talked about self-development and mindset transformation or working on yourself or whatever you want to call it, but you will take from whichever podcast you're listening to about whatever subject what you will. And look, there, you know, on this show we might delve into the ones that look to give you those ideas, perspectives, ways to work, and just showing you a great example on this episode on how, you know, it's helped her out. And indeed when I read it and listened to it and watched it, it was like there's so much value in there. I mean, I made probably about a 10-page set of notes on it, and as I said, the relatability was another thing too. It wasn't like, you know, surrounded in like text speak or, you know, the complicated language. It was put down in simple examples, simple things you can follow, and yeah, just as I said, just wants to help you dive in more. But the thing you take away is like there's a lot of possibilities for you, and we're more connected by experience than we think. Like we often feel that like, shit, I'm the only person going through this and no one else has got this going on and I'm the only one ever to have this, and we all say that, but in truth, as my coach put it, we've all got the same problems, just living in different houses.
Yeah, well, I think there was a lot of talk, wasn't there, during COVID about we're not all in the same boat, but we are all on the same ocean. We're just in different boats.
Exactly.
I kind of wanted to talk about cognitive dissonance, but I don't think we're going to have time, so that might be one for a different time.
Leave them wanting more.
Yeah, well, I think I might. Well, I'm kind of a little bit torn on what to do for our next podcast, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
I've already got a couple in mind, and I'm not going to lie, they are two of Lewis Raymond Taylor's podcasts. There's a couple in there that I really would love for you to listen to. If you haven't already, you might have already actually. I think have you already listened to most of them?
Not really, no.
No. Oh, okay, cool. Or whether to go down a completely different road, because there's a couple of other podcasts that I'm listening to. There's one that I'm re-listening to that I listened to a couple of years ago. That is probably one of the very first big podcasts that kind of got podcasts really going. Or something comedy. Have you? There's one out there called "My Dad Wrote a Porno," and it's quite. So I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe we should. We should try doing something. The only problem is that the other one that I'm thinking about is a few podcasts, and I think probably you need to listen to all of them.
All of them. Okay.
Of the series. So maybe that's one that we should do when we have a bit of a break, and we should maybe both pick one each that's maybe got a few episodes and listen to it each
as a series,
series, and then come back and maybe do a couple of episodes talking about the series, because there's some really good series out there, and one of them is one of my personal favorite podcasts. So
interesting. Well, look, this is the show where we'll look to do just that, right? I mean, there's plenitude of examples out there where they're one-off shows, series, compilations, call it what you will, right? This is the show where it's not about what was said, it's about what we heard. So listen, thank you for tuning into this episode, and we'll catch you all on the next one.
Thank you and goodbye.